everyone should have ADAS, and it's making cars safer, and that's great. But what unlocks the opportunity is the human not paying attention. If you can't do that, then you're not fundamentally changing the business model. And that's kind of what we see with Tesla today, with people forecasting it, and where we think there's this huge gap. A lot of people still forecast it, and they say, okay, how many people are going to subscribe to FSD? Oh, FSD gets better, so they can now charge $12,000, and instead of 10% of the fleet, now 20% of the fleet will do that, and it's margin accretive because it's software. I would say that's kind of the status quo modeling of it. Whereas what Tasha has done, and I think is the right way for people, and the way that we'll see more people do it as Robotaxi launches and beats people over the head with the idea that this is real, is the per mile unit economics. And that is a business model transformation, right? It's like humans are expensive. I think that's the first point, right? Over 10 years, what is a human in manufacturing cost? That's a present value of $550,000. And that's not including turnover or searching for someone to hire. So again, to the broad point, if you have a robot that can do what a human can do, it's a no-brainer, right? It's like, you're not going to, even if the robot costs $250,000, it's fine. But I think the reality is, where are we on this chart? We're in this bottom left corner. What is the productivity uplift of a robot? This is where the math is harder for people to, I think, grok intuitively, which is, what does picking and placing mean? It's like, what does a dishwasher in our house, like, what is that productivity uplift relative to being a human in a house?
Value investors look for stocks with steady gains. Growth investors, on the other hand, are willing to bet on visionary companies for future growth. Many investors in Tesla see it as not just an auto company, but one that will transform energy, autonomy, and robots. Today, we get to speak to Sam Korus, the Director of Research for Autonomous Technology and Robotics at ARK Invest. Sam will share his thoughts on his incredible research. How will Tesla's focus on $15,000 purpose-built cybercabs and reduced cost per mile compare with its competitors? What will the robot landscape look like, and will Tesla dominate? ARK Invest is an investment management firm founded by Cathie Wood. The company is known for its focus on disruptive innovation. ARK offers a multitude of investment vehicles that provide investors with exposure to these innovative sectors, including ETFs and a venture fund. We'll also be joined by Larry Goldberg, a serial entrepreneur and longtime Tesla analyst. Welcome, Sam. Welcome, Larry. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Sam, I wanted to have this conversation with you because the work you've done for ARK Invest and this big ideas report that you guys shared is pretty significant. I think Larry and I and many others think that the research you guys do is top notch. There's nothing else there. I'm a big fan of disruptive innovation, like looking for where trends are headed. And when they do hit, they will disrupt entire markets. So your big ideas report, I want to ask you, like, where do you guys see Tesla? I know you guys are big investors in Tesla. Your previous research on it has been dead on, and curious to see where you're at now. What is your thesis on Tesla? And maybe you can start with this, explaining what this is.
Sure. And you say me, but first, got to give a shout out. It's the whole team. So
of course,
Tasha doing tremendous work on the autonomous side of things. Daniel and Akash as well. Really make it all possible to pull together Tesla. And the reason, you need so many people, Herbert, ties in exactly to this, right? You see that first section, convergence. That really is the story of big ideas, right? Everything that's happening right now, the advancements in AI, energy storage, all of these things are catalyzing and being catalyzed by each other. And so Tesla has been and continues to be one of our largest holdings. And it really is the story of convergence, right? You have the Robotaxi side, which is a huge portion of the value we attribute to it in our open source model. You can see 90% of that is being driven by Robotaxi. Then you have the energy storage side, where Tesla's seeing tremendous growth. You've got AI, which is powering all of it as well. It's really is pulling everything together in a remarkable way.
So you see Tesla, right? Your thesis in Tesla is that multiple of these innovations is all coming together. It's going to converge. But right now, your forecast for Tesla is primarily built on the Robotaxi opportunity. when do you think you'll include the Optimus part of it into the valuation forecast?
Yeah, so this is a big debate, I would say, not just inside of ARK, but broadly as well. And so, we integrated it very minimally in last year's open source model. Really minimal impact, just because of the types of assumptions that we were making. Even though we recognize that this could be a huge opportunity, since then Elon has come out and said, maybe 10,000 humanoid robots this year, and then scale by 10x each year, and then you've got a crazy workforce of robots. I think with humanoid, the way that we're thinking about it is, let's see the execution and rollout of autonomous, and then use that really as a guidepost for humanoid robots. And the somewhat of the thinking behind this is, a humanoid robot and the unconstrained world that it operates in is, likely 1,000, maybe even 10,000x more complicated than a autonomous car. And what's amazing, and I think what's really shifted with respect to robotics, is that you go back 3-5 years, everyone assumed that this was going to be hardware limited, right? You don't have the actuators or the sensors to make this possible. Now it's very clear this is software defined, and software is moving extremely quickly. But it does seem like autonomous vehicles needs to happen and needs to start scaling as kind of this milestone to hit, as you have humanoid robots start to enter the fray.
Yeah, I think that's actually fair, right? So I was telling you earlier that you guys have done tremendous research, right? And you've done deep dives in Robotaxi, and I think we should do that conversation first. But it doesn't stop you guys from doing deep dive research in robots. But you're just saying, well, we're gonna think about the forecasting and when do we include in the forecast. Let's take a beat. And that's fair. I think that's fine, as long as you know robots are coming and you do know better than everyone else.
Could I just raise a issue here? Well, a question, really, not an issue. So in your venture fund, you've invested in Figure, and I see recently in Apptronic, which I'm delighted to see, since I'm an investor there too. It just seems a little odd that you're already investing in these two companies and yet not recognizing the potential for Optimus in Tesla.
Well, I'd say you can look at the valuation of those two companies, and it's like incremental progress moves those by a significant factor, whereas a company as large as Tesla, doing all of these other things, they could all make the exact same amount of progress, and it could be a 10x for a very small company, and it could be at the margin for a company the size of Tesla. But Herbert, I don't want to mess up with the scheduled events here. So maybe as a cliffhanger for the robot conversation later is, is this hype or is it not? I want both of your opinions later, and we can discuss.
Right.
That's going to be a good one, because that's very interesting. Both Larry and I obviously know a lot about robots, and you do too with your research. So I'd be curious where you guys land. But we do need to address Robotaxi first. This is imminent. You've got Tesla continuing to forecast that they're going to launch a Robotaxi service in June in Austin. Tesla just got one of the first permits required in California. It's just still a human-driven service, but it's just permits that they need to do. So going back to your deck that you guys helped put together, of course, you were one of the people that put this together. Talking about robotaxis, EVs continue to take share from ICE vehicles, and again, you're looking at it from the broadly that eventually a future is autonomous EVs. Let me pause there and ask you that question, Sam. We've just had people very concerned that Zeekr has announced that they're going to be offering their ADAS, advanced ADAS solution to all their cars for free. So they're a smaller play in China. Then you got BYD about 2 weeks ago saying this as well. It seems to me that in my mind, I see these guys as like, it's now table stakes. You have to say you have autonomous, otherwise you're just an EV maker and the future is autonomous vehicles. What's your take on what's happening in that field?
I think that's the right take. And everyone should have ADAS and it's making cars safer, and that's great. But what unlocks the opportunity is the human not paying attention. And that's really, if you can't do that, then you're not fundamentally changing the business model. And, that's kind of what we see with Tesla today, with people forecasting it, and where we think there's this huge gap. A lot of people still forecast it and they say, okay, how many people are going to subscribe to FSD? Oh, FSD gets better, so they can now charge $12,000, and instead of 10% of the fleet, now 20% of the fleet will do that, and it's margin accretive because it's software. I would say that's kind of the status quo modeling of it. Whereas what Tasha has done, and I think is the right way for people, and the way that we'll see more people do it as Robotaxi launches and beats people over the head with the idea that this is real, is the per mile unit economics, and that is a business model transformation.
Yeah, let's get right to that then. I have to kind of like love these slides, by the way. This is good. So this is like, like you had all these companies announcing that they're going to do autonomous commercial launch, as Tesla started talking about it, and all these other companies came out and said, hey, we're doing it too. But who actually ended up doing it? It's Google with Waymo and Tesla. Everyone else, they don't have any plans. Of course, this is the legacy auto. Just something to keep in mind. Everybody will make announcements, but that won't happen.
Yeah, that's a great slide from Tasha, right? It's everyone critiques Tesla for being late, when in reality, they just haven't quit, right? It's, you can be a quitter or you can be late.
Exactly. And then why don't you explain this slide?
Yeah, this is the business model really transformation that Robotaxi enables. For essentially 100 years, the price of traveling, cost per mile of a personally owned vehicle, has been the same. And the Robotaxi is this opportunity to continue this cost decline. And in doing so, you open up a huge amount of demand.
Yeah, this is going to change everything.
But yeah, maybe if we go to the energy cost decline and the Robotaxi itself, I know that's I think the most exciting with recent.
This one?
Yeah, this one here. Okay. Do you want to, Herbert, you can contextualize with the recent happenings and announcements, because even this now is slightly out of date given
okay, let me see if I get this correct, right? This is the cool thing about you guys, is that you are researching it, you're predicting what's going to happen, and then it actually turns out that things that you're saying turned out. And so one of the things that we were hoping to hear was whether or not the cost of the cybercab can actually be reduced to be as low as possible. What is their cost per mile, but also what is their battery and their efficiency based on the batteries? And it's interesting that Tesla decided to go with the small battery, like as much as just as small as possible, but have the most efficiency. So let's listen to what Franz and Lars just said recently in an interview with Sandy Monroe.
Our cars last, the Robotaxi can last the full day without having to recharge too much. So we got a lot of models going around, trying to figure out like how, like a typical Robotaxi would go, pick up someone, go to the next job, whatever. And we think that we can do that with like quite a small battery pack. It's under 50 kilowatt hours, and still have over close to 300 miles of real world range.
What do you think?
To me, this is exciting. I think initially they came out and they said 250 miles. Now they're saying, maybe just under 300. So maybe this is more in the 275, 280 range. If you pull up the slide, I can walk you through kind of how we think about it from a Wright's Law perspective and just very high level. So one, the efficiency, crazy, not unheard of. This is somewhat on path with what we expected, but I'd say crazy relative to what other people thought. So being able to do something like 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour is huge. And you can see this reflected in this table to the right, where, what are battery costs today? Certainly under $100. In China, there are reports of LFP batteries in that $50 range. I think that will fluctuate and come down, but certainly there was an excess supply as traditional automakers cut back their EV plans and there was a glut of batteries. But we think over the next 5 to 7 years, that probably comes down to really in the $30 range.
Really?
We don't want to blow people's minds too much, and they're trying to do this in the next 2 years, not 5 to 7 years. And so for the launch of cybercab, we do think that $50 per kilowatt hour for an LFP is reasonable. And then if you hit that 5.5 miles per kilowatt hour, the whole battery pack system, right, it could be pretty inconsequential relative to what you would expect, that $2,300. And then very broadly speaking, the drivetrain of a vehicle tends to be roughly 20% the cost of the total vehicle. And so, even when you look at what the cybercab is, it's 2 seats, a drivetrain, and a screen. So,
And an ultralight body.
Right. So it could be feasible that something like that would be $15,000 at scale. It'll be interesting to see what they add in, how luxurious they make the interior, heated or cooled seats, other features. Safety is always going to be a priority, both on the autonomous side, but also the passive side. But I think that this low cost really sets an incredible base for a Robotaxi platform.
Sam, though, I've heard the argument on the other side where people are saying the cost of the Robotaxi is important, but it's not that important as people say, because it's just amortized over 10, 15 years anyways. So it doesn't matter that my Waymo cost me $100,000, but Tesla's Cybercab is $15,000. At the end of the day, you take the $100,000, you spread it over months and how much money you're making on a monthly basis, it won't really that impact. What's your thinking about that?
Yeah, and this again goes back to modeling that Tasha's done, where it does matter, I think, more than people appreciate, not just from the upfront cost and scaling it, right? It's like, what is the business model to scale for Tesla? Are you scaling because customers are buying the car and then deploying it? Or if you're Waymo, is that something you need to take onto your balance sheet, right? That in and of itself is a differentiation and an interesting question. But then on the maintenance and repair, I think it's very fair to think of that as a percent of the cost of the vehicle. If you've got expensive sensors and you have to hire people to fix it because it gets banged up, and even though they're going to be autonomous, that's not going to mean zero crashes. It will mean far, far fewer, but that'll be a factor. And then the things to consider with a Robotaxi: utilization and deadhead miles. And so it's not just, over time, but also what you can charge per mile, because not every mile is going to be someone paying for it. And so it does actually come into play more than people would expect.
But Sam, to be realistic, if you're looking at the difference between an investment of $15,000 and $100,000 to earn the same return, it's pretty crazy to say that it doesn't really matter because the margins are so great, because the investment level is critical to the return. So if you've got something that's going to cost you 6 times as much to get the same return, your investment is going to be 1/6 of the return.
They're saying that they'll lease it, and now you turn it into a monthly fee, and that monthly fee is more than well covered by the monthly revenue that you're going to get back.
But it macht nichts, because the differential is going to be very significant. The differential between $15,000 and $100,000, whether you pay the capital cost up front or you pay the lease rate, that component of cost is going to be, 6 times the difference, 6.5 times the difference, or 6 3/4 times the difference. That's a huge number at scale that you can't. I mean, when you talk about at scale, you can't ignore things like 6 times or 6.5 times the capital cost.
Yeah. Sam,
And
with this, does ARK believe that Tesla will own all cybercabs, or will they sell the cybercabs?
so it does seem like to start, they're going to own them and they want to have full control and understand the system completely, which is very in line with what you would expect from Tesla, SpaceX, any Elon company out there. I think what we're currently thinking and discussing is, what does the demand curve look like over the course of the day? Right, it ebbs and flows. Right, you got commute times, then you have downtime, and then you've got commute time again. And so it might make sense for Tesla to own a portion of the fleet that would satisfy base load demand. And so
Mhm.
those vehicles they'd own enough such that they're very highly utilized assets, and then rely on customers to own and operate fleets to meet those peak demand. And
Yeah, that
to me,
makes.
this is another one of those surprising things. One of the
Mhm.
A common pushback people say is, "Oh, but people won't lease their cars to the network." And to me,
Yeah,
it's like I'm always shocked by this
yeah,
because, like, right now, if you're in an Uber, someone's in that car leasing it to you. And so it's like,
yeah.
you're going to tell me that this person would not do the same thing, but not have to be in the car with me. It's like, that's a crazy stance, I think.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Money will make you do all sorts of things that you didn't think you would do once you realize, what, I can be making 2-3 grand a month. I guess my point was this: if Tesla can actually make a $15,000 Robotaxi, they won't need to sell it. I mean, the argument was, if it's going to cost me $60,000 per car, yeah, okay, the hit on the asset's too much for a company to absorb. But if it's 15,000, they might just own it.
I still think you can get, I mean, for them, it's like, it's still likely a better business model to sell it, right? Because
Mhm.
imagine you sell it, the car is not going to be utilized as much. So it doesn't make sense necessarily for them to hold an asset that's going to be utilized less than whatever their threshold is. And then for an individual, they can call it when they want it, they can make the money from it. It's like having that flexible response. It's almost like selling it is like a battery on the grid, right? It's like a flexible load. And it's good to have batteries on the grid. And same way, it's like you want this flexible response from individuals.
Mm. Okay.
But clearly, they'll start the whole project owning the cars, right? And then they'll make the decision based upon experience and learning and so on and so forth. One thought I had is that since they're starting the project with Ys and threes, that as they feed in robotaxis, they'll own their own robotaxis, but use Ys and threes of owners on the who want to feed their Ys and threes into the network. So it gives them a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, I think they will sell Ys and threes to consumers, and then for fleet managers, they might consider selling fleets of robotaxi. Otherwise, they'll keep all cybercabs. Just doesn't make sense to me. But so let's get to the big slide. This is the big one, I think. Right? Is like, what is the cost per mile that Tesla's going to be offering it, and how's it compared to competitors? You guys did a great job here explaining this in detail. You're estimating 30-40% lower than Waymo as one example of competitors. Tell us how you came up with that.
Yeah, again, so this is Tasha's work here, but this really comes into utilization and upfront cost of the vehicle. Right, you can see that on just the different price buckets here. Uh, Waymo obviously using lidar and a much higher cost type of vehicle that weighs on what it can do at scale. So to what you were saying earlier, this is kind of the answer to that question. Does it matter
Yeah,
the cost of the vehicle? Certainly, we think
the
so.
depreciation is right here. Yeah.
And then,
Operation support seems to be lower for Waymo, that you're giving them such a low amount, which I believe that they're hugely dependent on remote operators, and that black line should be bigger, wider.
well, that's at scale. You can look at the early launch is to the left.
Gotcha. Okay,
So
gotcha.
so there's that. And then Herbert, maybe the last one here is just the percent of miles traveled on electric versus
Is that the next
with
one? Next slide? Where are we here?
it might be further up.
I want to get to that slide. This one?
Up.
This is a big one.
Yeah, well that's a
up?
classic. This one. And so this is Daniel McGuire did a lot of work on this one as well as Akash. And the point here really just to be made is people are still so focused on electric vehicles, and you say, okay, you're selling electric vehicles into a massive fleet of vehicles. And so what share of miles are driven that are electric is it's a slow transition. But if you start to launch an autonomous electric vehicle fleet, this really starts to take off because, and this is what Elon says in a lot of these calls, right? It's like if you go from a car that's utilized 5% of the time to 50% of the time, well, that's a 10x increase in utilization. And so you're starting to eat up more electric miles than would otherwise be anticipated.
Yeah, that shows you the commitment that Elon's going to do because he wants to move it as fast as possible. And the fastest way is actually autonomy. That's how you're going to get at least 5 times. You agree with that guess? 5 times more than a regular one car?
You're saying utilization?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think potentially even more than that, but you can start there.
For those that may not follow in detail, I mean, what we're saying is that a robotaxi is going to be on the road 5 times longer per day than a car that's owned for personal use, which sits in the garage for most of the day, or sits at the point of work or the point of shopping or wherever it is, sits parked most of the day and is driven only for a very small proportion of the day. Whereas a robotaxi is highly likely to be used a much larger proportion of the day. And that's the real difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the theory is we'll need a lot fewer vehicles in the future and put a lot fewer vehicles on the road. Or will people use transport more often? I mean, very often these things, the utilization increases to the available capacity.
I got 2 slides here I really want to get to your opinion on. I've been asking this question to everybody I've interviewed, and now I get to ask you directly. This is great. This is so good. So this one here, right? So what you guys have done here is you're forecasting when you think that Tesla will be able to have their software, the full self-driving, to be as safe as a human. And what you've done by reading this is that you're basically using the compute as the proxy. The more compute that Tesla is able to have, the more likely that they're going to hit. And you've got 2 milestones here. The 10,000 miles between critical intervention is equivalent to when one human's driving for 1 year worth. And that's the average, but 10,000 miles, that there might be one critical intervention for one human driving, typical 1 year's worth. But then when you get to 700,000, that's when it's as safe as a human, as safe as the average human out there. And so you're saying, well, we expect it when Tesla is able to get to 190,000 H100 equivalents. And you're thinking maybe by October of this year, that's when we get to that number. So I just ask everybody, do you think that that's fair based on compute? I do. Some people think that this is kind of, simplistic, but I think it's the right one. Tell me how you guys came up with this.
Yeah, I think it is fair, but I also don't want to. I'm going to leave it cliffhanger for your conversation if you speak to Tasha, because this is I don't want to steal Tasha's thunder here, and this is Tasha and Brett have done tremendous work, so I don't want to tread on their territory here, but very high level, yes, we do think this is a fair way to do it. I think we've seen these scaling laws continue to hold. That's why we still see these companies investing tremendous amounts in compute to do this. Larry, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm aligned with these numbers. I've studied these numbers quite carefully when they came out. I think they're conservative, to be honest. I've heard Brett and Tasha discuss this in detail and explain how they came to this number. And the reason I'm thinking that they're very conservative is that we have taken the kind of general population of driver into account. And one of the things that is true about the average population of drivers is that it's offset by the enormous accident prone, the enormous number of accidents inflicted by young drivers. They really skew the balance very dramatically. It may be true, given what we're seeing in trends today, that the young drivers are the ones that are the first adopters. And so, we may see a surprise in terms of accident rates if that holds. I mean, so many young people are not getting licenses, are using Ubers. And, if that trend holds, and particularly if the prices drop, it's going to, I think, explode. I think we may see the new driver syndrome disappear soon, and also the older driver, also accident-prone people, probably not as serious accidents as the young people get into. But so I think the statistics may be skewed by that component. I may be wrong.
So when I look at this, first of all, I loved it. I loved it a lot. And the reason is that it shows you that it's really now compute. It's like based on compute. Will we get to the critical miles per intervention? The answer is yes, if you increase compute. And I think that I agree with, right? Because that's what Tesla's been able to show, right? More compute, more time in compute, by the way, that allows the system to get better and better and better, and then they can map it out. And they've been showing that based on your sharing what has happened in the last year. So I like that they tied it to compute. This idea that you need 190,000 and it won't be October, that's where I'm going, you guys think you're conservative? And I'm like, well, that's, Tesla's announced, they said that they will get to this level by mid-year. So the question is, do they have access to more compute than we realize? Do you guys think that Tesla's using the compute that's available in XAI, or they're two separate systems?
Two separate systems is my understanding.
I'm aligned with that. Yeah.
There's been reports, and I know you can't trust reports, but there's reports that Tesla is using the Memphis supercomputers for FSD.
Grok doesn't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Grok filled out my final four bracket, so we'll see.
Everybody else.
I think that Grok may be better at predicting, but it's interesting how Grok has paused that, because anyway, separate subject, but Grok thinks that they're not, Grok says that all that Grok can gather indicates that they're not using that.
Tesla FSD is only using Tesla's supercomputers, not XAI supercomputer.
Yeah,
okay.
And if you look at Tesla's diagram of compute capacity, which they did, I think, a year ago, I don't think it tracks to where the supercomputer is in Memphis by any manner of means. So,
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah. Regardless, I mean, you know what? You guys are saying October. That's a good number for me. It doesn't matter if it's, let's say, delayed, because remember, this is as safe as a human, which means at any point A to any point B, any human, in the US, let's say, right? So that's pretty significant, and that you can reach that as soon as you get this. And I'm not concerned that Tesla will not be able to get to this level of compute sometime. So done deal.
That's right. Should we raise the humanoid robot question, or do you have
one more? I just want to go to this one, and then let's go to humanoid robots. But I think this is such a critical slide. I think you guys did a great job here as well. Basically, you're saying here that if you are competing with ride hail, you want to be like an Uber market. That's a $134 billion market. But as soon as you bring the price down to, instead of Uber and Lyft, they charge $2 to $4 per mile. If you can get it to $1 per mile in the Western markets, you're already at, you can grow the market to not just 134. It's almost like 8x to 1 trillion. Then if you get it 60 cents a mile, you're now talking about different kinds of commuting. And then it just keeps going to, once you get to 25 cents a mile, this is like all sorts of things that you haven't thought about. It's a $5 trillion market, right?
Yeah, and again, this is a chart that Tasha's made and been updating for a long time now. And I think that, Herbert, to your point, this early market is potentially extremely profitable, because you can look at Uber and Lyft today and you can see the amount of rides they're giving at the price point. And then imagine if, instead of it being a cost of paying a driver, you just strip out that driver and they offer that price umbrella. So, you call an Uber, it's $2, or you call a Robotaxi and it's $1.90. You choose the $1.90 option every single time, but it costs, a fraction, because you're not having to source drivers constantly. That's really profound, and it is at the leading edge of adoption.
Right, and not to mention the better experience that everybody is reporting in the Waymo cars versus the Uber cars. So that is an important point. And one of the factors that I think is interesting but as yet unexplored is the impact of wide-scale adoption of robotaxi on the roads in general. But that's probably for another day.
Have you guys started planning that out, researching that, Sam?
The impact of what happens when there's all robotaxis?
Yeah.
Well, there's more traffic. I think people say, oh no, everything's going to work perfectly and you're going to have cars flying and zipping. It's like, I think the reality is far more traffic, and this transition period is going to be interesting too, because in theory there's this point in time where it becomes exponentially more painful to be a human driver, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't necessarily mind being in traffic if you're in a robotaxi, because I don't know, you're on a call, you're watching a movie, you're doing whatever. But if you're a human driver and you're in a traffic jam of robotaxis, that is certainly going to be infuriating and painful to live by. So I think, more cars on the road leads to more traffic. That creates some interesting opportunities for getting places quickly. What do you do there? I also think, the short haul flight has been something that we've discussed where, Larry, you're Mr. Road Trip. I'm sure you can draw the radius of where it is much better to even now driving with FSD and you're behind the wheel. It's just a better experience than going through the airport, having to worry that, your overhead bin space is going to be taken up, and then you wind up having to check a bag, and then you're in the airport for an extra hour, as opposed to, hey, here's my car and it's a breeze to go 3-4 hours, and that's a big market as well.
I go 24, 30 hours, and it makes. And I've just been on a air trip to Austin and St. Pete, and honestly, I regret that I didn't drive instead. So, yeah, but I will challenge one thing. You may get more traffic, more cars on the road, but you're going to get much better traffic control. And when you get better traffic control, better driving, you can put far more cars on the road than we currently have. The only joker in the pack is whether we get FSD or we get autonomy on trucks, because the trucks are the killer in terms of traffic pattern. But anyway,
I think that's an interesting debate too, right? Because it's, at least in the city, so much traffic is caused by stopped vehicles. I don't think that's going to change. I think, right. And then it's like you get an autonomous car that's like delivering food or something.
Right.
I think
absolutely.
I think there's going to be a lot of complex externalities that will emerge as this rolls out.
Your point about the cities is absolutely on target, but on the freeways, behavior of the autonomous car, I've seen it in my own car, in my own autonomous car, how well it behaves on the freeway and how I allow it to behave that. And I don't start, I don't want to get ahead and stuff like that. I just let it do its thing. It's a big improvement in terms of traffic control, and that will enable cars to move for the traffic to move fast. Anyway, that's a subject for another day. We can
Let's talk.
battle that one out later.
Let's talk humanoid bots.
That's right. Time
That's
for
the next
humanoid
big
robot.
topic. So you guys, we asked the question earlier, when is ARK going to start including humanoid bots in the price target for Tesla? We've all been watching in the last year, just an explosion of humanoid bots everywhere. This is part of your research as well. These are the bots every day we're seeing, and this doesn't even include the hundreds of Chinese bots that are out there. They're just being able, we just saw 1X demoed at a conference there, and they were using 1X was actually vacuuming using a vacuum cleaner. I think everybody here agrees that Tesla is the leader because of their manufacturing capabilities. And so, yeah, curious what you're thinking about that then.
All right, I'm gonna go little rant here. So then cut me off, and we can go from there. Okay, I think the math of humanoid robots breaks people's minds, and so there's this dichotomy that is emerging because it's such a big opportunity, and in order to be useful, they have to do so little. So it's like, oh, that's a no-brainer, right? It's like, this is in that slide, you can see this is a $26 trillion per year opportunity, potentially bigger, right? It's like, if you replace all humans, it's even bigger than that. And so all you need to do is something. And this is like, a piece of this pie is tremendous. And at the same time, an autonomous car is a solution, right? It's doing every single part of the problem. Whereas a humanoid robot, in order to be useful, it doesn't even need to do the full solution, right? It's like, we did a slide on professional dishwashers, right? And I think the dishwasher is an interesting thing. It's one of the staples of automation in all of our homes. And yet, a professional dishwasher doesn't wash so many dishes. Of course they do, right? But it's like, you look up what are the tasks that they have to do, and washing dishes is one of a whole host of things. And it's like, we pay professional dishwashers $14 billion annually in the US, despite the fact that we sell dishwashing machines, right? So it's like, oh, this is a huge automation that we've already solved. But just kidding, it's like, we actually pay people more to do, quote, dishwashing than the actual hardware itself. And then if you look at what we do at home, we all have dishwashers. Not everyone, but a lot of people have dishwashers. And if you value the time that is spent on still, cleaning up after meals, it's a $246 billion opportunity. So it's like, if you had a robot at your home that all it did was clear the table and load the dishwasher, it's this huge value. And so, it's like, this is so big and so obvious. And I think the hard part here is that it is hard. It's like, what does it actually mean to be able to do a single task? It's much harder than I think people anticipate. And so, yes, it's true, like picking up a box and putting it somewhere, easy. And that's kind of this early application that we're seeing from, I would say, almost all of the humanoid robots companies. It's like, there's a huge market just lifting a box and putting it down. At the same time, it's like, just washing dishes is an incredibly complex thing to solve. And so it's like, this is the balance of where we are, and the difference between demo, deployment, and scaling. And so that's where I think it's very difficult to say where we are. I think there's such excitement because software moving extremely quickly. We should be excited. That's absolutely true. We should be excited. Huge opportunity. And we should be excited because, unlike autonomous driving, it just has to do a single thing. And where I'm hesitant, and I think there's still proof to be done, is, okay, let's see it. Like, let's see it beyond demo in a factory at scale. What are your guys' thoughts on?
So you're being cautious. You're being cautious, basically saying, yes, all this is exciting.
Cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. I think it's fair. I guess my quick thing would say this. Okay, so I think you're of course you guys are right. You've done a ton of research, but the hardware was the bottleneck, and then it became, once they were able to solve the actuators, then they go, now it's a software, right? We don't have the brains, and all of a sudden the software expanded to the point that they realized it can actually do certain tasks autonomously. Then it became the hardware again, and it kind of continues to this battle. And you heard Elon say in the last earnings call, he said something like, we need to have the tasks to scale to the number of bots we make. So right now, they can make thousands, right? They'll make 1,000 or 2,000 this year. Next year, they're going to make 50,000. Let's see if that happens or not. But when they make more than 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, what tasks are they going to do? Well, the good news is that I think the tasks for pick and place, I think you agreed with me, there's a huge number of bots you can use for those tasks. Let's say in a typical Tesla factory, they can do 2,000 to 5,000 bots just doing pick and place things. That is doable now, I think, personally. So I think there's room for, let's say, 5,000 per factory, let's say 100,000, 200,000, 1 million bots out there if you start selling it out there. Now, then by the time that they can make 100,000 or 1 million, that's when you need to ask the question, can they do more tasks? And these tasks are much more complicated than you realize. That's a year or 2 years away.
Well,
so
I think, I think the point you brought up is an interesting one too, because so this was something we debated internally. Will Tesla sell these externally? And it's like, well, no. If they're great, then they're just going to keep them and use them. But then Tesla's saying, no, we might do this. And I think you're hitting the nail on the head with what you just said there, which is this will be something interesting to see, because if you can make 50,000 of them and they're really capable, then in theory you can find uses for them and do a crazy amount of things. But
that's not what's going to happen.
If all it can do is pick and place, well, sure, there's crazy demand for that, but probably not 50,000 pick and placers at Tesla. And so the degree to which they start selling externally is going to be reflective of
limitations.
What is the actual software capability versus reality. And the promise though then, right, it's like, why humanoid at all is because it's generalizable. So as software updates come out, they should become more and more capable.
Yeah, I think that it's it's going to be a while, but they're going to be used for dirty, dangerous, and difficult DDD 3D tasks at the outset. But start at the very simple level and then build upwards. There are so many manufacturers and there are so many sales groups looking for use cases. It's interesting that Boston Dynamics did not find a use case for a humanoid bot in all the time that they were, building these very expensive bots. But I guess it's just because they were so expensive. They tried to make, for their warehouses, they made very, very warehouse specific complex bots, and they implemented those. But the value add of the bot, even for those 3D tasks, is potentially so high. I've done the numbers, and the discount value of just one bot could be $250,000, even on relatively low pay scale. So there are a huge number of manufacturers. There's driving need in the marketplace, and I think those forces are going to come together they're forcing functions. It's going to happen once the bot can be manufactured and once the compute power gets to that. But I think that we're far from solved on the compute power. I think there's going to have to be a significant edge compute functionality in each of the major locations where they're used at scale. Anyway, that's just some thoughts that I've had.
Yeah, or maybe if you have the slide on that crossover point when, there, look at you're pro, but
I'm a pro.
You are a pro, right? It's like humans are expensive. I think that's the first point, right? Over 10 years, what is a human in manufacturing cost? That's a present value of $550,000, and that's not including turnover or searching for someone to hire. So again, to the broad point, if you have a robot that can do what a human can do, it's a no-brainer, right? It's like you're not going to, even if the robot costs $250,000, it's fine, right? It could cost $500,000. You say, that's great. This is amazing. But I think the reality is, to Larry, what you were saying is, where are we on this chart? We're in this bottom left corner, where it's like, what is the productivity uplift of a robot? And I think this is where the math is harder for people to, I think, grok intuitively, which is, what does picking and placing mean? It's like, what does a dishwasher in our house, like, what is that productivity uplift relative to being a human in a house? Well, I don't know. It could be 0.05% productivity uplift, depending on what you're doing. And I think, what is lifting a box slowly, or what does having to train a robot, and I think this is a key piece of robotics broadly, is if the robot can come into your factory and just work, huge. That's like amazing, because one of the biggest constraints on robots thus far is the fact that the robot itself doesn't cost that much, but you need to pay a professional to then come in and set up your factory. And then you need to pay someone to program it. And then it's going to do the exact same thing over and over again. And so what is exciting about,
and it has to be maintained. Don't underestimate maintenance and continuous training. Well, there'll be continuous supervision, I guess.
Right. And so it's like, okay, humanoid robot. It is exciting because we're starting to see demos, teleoperation. It can learn a task in, 2 days and a week, whatever, and then it can do it. Okay, but can it come into a new factory and do it? Or does it then require a week and you're like, okay, this is how you're going to set it up. You need to change your process here. All of that then is eating into the overall productivity uplift that this humanoid robot is doing. And then it's, okay, it works and it can do it 95% of the time. Okay, but then for that extra 5%, that requires you do this process and you have these people watching. And then, okay, you take all of this into account, and then what is your productivity uplift? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it 1%? And that, it's like, this is the thing that I'm watching most closely to say, is this like the slide that Tasha has where it's, I don't know, 2015 and everyone says autonomous driving, we're doing it in the next 5 years. And here we are 10 years later and it's about to happen? Or is this something different?
So, I mean, Sam, just what I did is I said, there's no way the bot is going to come in without cost. I've layered in this tremendous amount of supervision, charging, maintenance, and management. And I've looked at the annual net saving at the mean level of what we pay people in these factories and in warehouses and so on. And I've discounted not at 10 years, but 5 years at a 20% discount rate. And that bot is still worth $250,000. That is a lot of money, even at the cost, even at the bill of material cost that they're running at right now. I mean, they're running below 200,000, maybe above 100,000, but even at the bill of materials cost before they're in mass production, it looks to me like there's an opportunity for early introduction. And the earlier we introduce it, the longer it's at job, the more work it does, the more intelligence it's going to get. So I think we're at a much closer point to that magic moment than you're believing at this point. That's just my view.
Yeah.
I agree with that too. We've done a lot of work with CERN, and we priced in like having a human manager managing. These bots work 3 shifts, not just one. We've worked it out that they can actually take the same breaks, 15-minute battery charge, 30-minute battery charge, 15-minute battery charge, just like a human would, and yet be able to work 3 shifts. Batteries are updated, human managers. Plus, when you train one, you've trained them all. So you're right about the first shift, maybe the first kind of thing. But so for me, I look at it based on The rate limiting step is how many bots Tesla can make. If they can make 5,000 bots this year, and all it is just pick and place this year, they'll need it all. That's great. Next year, they're saying 50,000. If all they can do is still pick and place, like we just talked about it now, 50,000, that's fine. They'll sell it to other manufacturers for 50,000 for pick and place. They're going to sell them all. Now, the next year, when they make 500,000, you're saying to me, well, maybe by that point, they won't be able to do many. They just won't have that skill to be able to actually do a job yet beyond pick and place. And you've already, maxed out the pick and place. I don't agree. I think that there will be many jobs that you can still find that is very limited, that you can still be trained and still have that positive margin, positive cost per job, per hour. So I think it's just a matter of building it. And by that point, that the compute and the scale and ability for these bots to do things that, remember, you said it too, right? The task is unlimited. With EVs, it's they have one task, right? Driving you from point A to point B. And so the margins are really low and it's hard for you to sell in a competitive market. And bots, it's like you can say, okay, it can't do dishwashing yet. Well, then let's do, name one other task and all of a sudden it'll do that task and then calculate how many of those you can replace. So,
yeah, I'm very, you see our investments. I'm very optimistic.
Yeah.
Cautiously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of between the two of you guys. I think Herbert's way out there. I think.
What did I say? What did I say that's out there?
Reality will strike very early in those marvelous plans. But on the other hand, I'm not as cautious, I think, as Sam. I see a path towards, there aren't that many pick and place jobs in Tesla. I've been through all their factories. Not all. I've been to 2 of their factories in great detail. There are not that many pick and place. In the warehouse, there are quite a few, but I'm not sure there's 5,000, give or take. And particularly if it's working 3 shifts or even 2.5 shifts, that reduces it by a third or a half. So I'm not sure there's that things are going to scale quite as quickly as that.
Let's go to it. Okay, they're going to make 2,000 to 3,000 bots this year. Okay, we all agree at this point that Tesla will be able to use that if they make them.
I don't agree with that necessarily. Listen, okay. I don't know if you've seen the video of the Starling factory in Bastrop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
There are no human beings. I mean, literally no human beings. I mean, I've been there when the shift changes. There are no human beings.
So I've been asking this question, but if you look at mobile phone manufacturing, there are thousands of human beings helping that.
Very different. That's very.
And so I asked that question. I don't see any. Do you need human beings to create a bot? This bot needs to make bots, and that's their answer.
Well, manufacturing them is the easy part. I mean, it's very difficult right now, but it's the easy part in terms of the business plan. The hard part is getting them to do the job.
Yeah. And then that gets to another interesting point, which is we believe, right, humanoid robots are going to create more automation, right? It's not like, oh, you don't need all of the specialized automation anymore. It's like, oh, no, this actually leads to a lot of other things that you can automate and other small manufacturing companies that would never be able to automate that can now automate with specialized use cases. But then maybe, I know we're running up on some time here. It's like huge opportunity. We've gone from hardware to software constrained. So software is going quickly. And it's like, okay, so this is going to happen. It's going to be a huge thing. And now the question is, how quickly does it happen?
Yeah. And I think the big problem that people tend not to consider is the use case perfection problem. It's going to take a while to adjust and figure out how bots and people work together, I think. Anyway.
Does ARK consider that Tesla might do more than just humanoid bots? They've referred to quite a number of the Tesla executives and AI team has referred to bot animals. And even Elon continuously, every time he's on a interview, he always says, everybody will want a C-3PO and R2-D2s. He's always talking about R2-D2s too.
So you're asking if they're going to make the
human
R2-D2?
scale bots? Yeah.
Yeah.
Different kinds of bots.
I think You never know. The opportunity is so large for humanoid. I imagine that they'll want to. Same thing with, autonomous. It's like, why didn't they do a lot of things? It's because, well, autonomous is the opportunity. So don't get distracted when you've got
Right.
the thing ahead of you still to deliver on. And I think that's true of autonomous. They'll deliver, and it'll be a huge opportunity. And then same thing for humanoid robot. I don't think they're gonna distract themselves until they've really gotten that flywheel going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. But they will be doing it. That's my point, is that there's going to be so much more than just humanoid robots.
Hope is always so positive.
It's like I think we're all,
Not a criticism.
no. I
I
think
admire
that
it.
Optimism's good.
Optimism's good.
I mean, to be clear, I think we're all agreeing that humanoid bots is a huge opportunity. We're just debating the timing, and timing is going to be very lumpy. So yeah, it could be that next year the bots don't have anything to do and they're not there yet. I'm not saying that
Right.
that's going to be for sure happening. Just
Herbert,
remember where we were a year ago in January of last year. Nobody, of so few people, thought that we would be here today with how many bot companies, what they're capable of doing, or like you said, they're demos, so we don't quite know yet.
Herbert, I want to ask you a question. It won't be the last question because we need to end on a high note. But given Larry's question just there, what do you think is the most overhyped technology right now?
Oh, wow. That's a very good question. I think the most overhyped would be quantum computing.
Good
That's the
call.
one that they come out there and they make these presentations and you go, holy cow, if that's true. And then when you dig a little deeper, it sounds like that there's still kind of research and nobody's proved that it's actually working. So I don't know.
That's fair. That's a good take.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about human and bots is that
So is it more? So fusion reactors are less or more than?
I have no idea. You asked. This is a question for ARK Invest. They're the ones that's the research on this.
You'll have to have Daniel McGuire on. He's done some very deep dives on all things nuclear, so he can share his
That'd
insight.
be great. Yeah. He's bloody good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I mean, I think we probably agree here that AI is not overhyped, and it's going to deliver more than people are expecting. And it's actually at the very beginning of what it's able to do. So
I think we've got huge surprises to come in AI still in terms of the evolution of the technology. Huge surprises.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's talk back to Tesla, ARK Invest. You guys are big believers in Tesla. What is your thinking right now? Or is your confidence even higher now as the months go by here, as we're getting closer to Robotaxi? What do you got? What kind of conversation are you guys having in the office there?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting time. It's always an interesting time. What am I saying? Right? It's like Robotaxi is getting closer and closer to commercial launch. This is the big opportunity. Simultaneously, you've got so much noise and backlash against Tesla, right? Domestic terror attacks, lighting cars on fire, things of that nature. And so it is interesting because yes, it's like we do think they're going to launch. Everything we see is indicative of continued advancement on Robotaxi, and that you can look at the open source model. That's where we see all of the value. And so yeah, it's the perfect illustration of short term versus long term, I would say. And it's like, yes, short term, there's certainly things that we did not expect to occur. I don't think anyone really predicted this type of backlash or attacks against vehicles. And this is the first quarter they launched new vehicle across the globe simultaneously. So I think that's interesting of itself as an accomplishment, but also it's getting publicized as a negative because it is adding noise to the story of, is there demand, is there not demand, Osborne effect, all of this. And I think, in the short term, Tesla continues to be a volatile and noisy story. But I think if you take a step back and you look at the long-term narrative arc and execution, it's like the noise fades away and it's pretty clear that they are executing on this longer term thesis.
Perfect. Sam, you're very articulate. Appreciate that. So people can go to arkinvest.com, right, to take a look at this document we just did, the 2025 research report, or the 2025 Big Ideas report. And I saw here that you guys are releasing something new. Is it called the Investment Opportunity Report? What is that?
Yeah, this is it's like a cut of big ideas more tied into the fund side. So the Big Ideas is more research driven and does not associate necessarily with specific investment opportunities. This is, you're going to look at it and you'll say, okay, I get it, but it's more tied to the fund side as well. So pairing it with the strategies and investments that go alongside it.
Perfect.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you. So you can follow Sam on X at Korus, ARK. I love your account, by the way. You ask good questions. I didn't even get to chase you down on a couple of points you made there. Like, yeah, is energy going to be, are we going to have an abundant energy or going to be scarce energy? And that's a whole show we should do one day in the future. Thank you so much, Sam. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Larry. Yeah, that was fun. Appreciate you guys. Bye, everybody. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.